the battle of the... and the tale of... And as we all know, it never began, for there is no starter and to a pig. Cut him all up, lay out his skin, and tell me now, where does the pig end? Not even the knife had an end, for although we know the important parts, nay, for there is no start or finish, but only the pieces we find useful in telling our tale. For it was the time of the ferning moon, and we were all gathered in the best of places to marvel in our bounty. And it was then made known to us that the makers of war and measurements intended to ply their craft upon our heads. A great commotion bubbled, and the birds rippled here and there at this awful news. Woolen dogs turned into the woods and never returned, and we know they still live, for their hair can be found in tufts across all the trees and branches in hybrid time. Fish spat, deer bellowed, and great cats grew invisible and never made their presence known again. Needless to say, the people of were also quite upset. Were it a day when we could look to the Flotstranders of the Haas and Strong and sing them the war song? Nay, for those were the times of big shoulders and fisher folk who liked playing jokes on us, fin-wormed folk and their habit of stealing our cattle and burning our huts was not one we took a liking to. And for that, we set fire to the sand when we liked, and their ships were too afraid to crest our rocky strings that spun into burning glass. And so is the arrangement of our discontentment in those times. I tell you now, the moon-driven folk of the Cyan Bomb of the today times, different than their trickster antecedents, and we are happy for that, thank you very much. And oh, to think of now, that we had but the strangers to the west, whereby the Haas and Thumb of the brook and Bow of the Mare's Leg could we venture out and call upon those strange beard folk, where glass and ice and sand and salt and stars and fish mean but the same. And whence they could have sailed to join our follied cause. To think, but if we even knew of their names, then as we do now. But, nay, we say, for only things come out when you call their name, and one must first know the thing. Near say it to be a day that we could call to our neighbour the nay bowers of the east and yeast, of drier spice and sprout. How envious we could be to call upon them as they are now, makers of song and riddles. What hedgerows they would conjure in a labyrinthine ladder that would confound the proudest found in all of Amaranth. Nay, for now they are a gentle-making folk, and even then they were the scolding sister to a telling diamond. Least of all, be it, and all amends were made. A row in kin, the foe is then as now. Nay, for these times I speak of were made dim by war's evening, and such as it was, that we all knew in our hearts that a meeting in the hidden place was to be had, which is a plain in solid tuft of earth between two sleeping mares that the Ball and Mott call the Mother Mountains. And it is best for making decisions, for nothing can hide there, not even words, not even swords. And people of all carved shapes fet for hurling dead meat at the hidden place, and every one did bring their woes and anger, but also did they bring their happiness and excitement. For those were the very youthful and very old, of which both can still dance or sit and clap to the drum. These were the times, I tell you. Oh, how I forgot to tell you now. These were the days of the strangest shapes of people, not for their stature, but to their nature. For even an elder grandmother that you could be forgiven for mistaking as a sleepy tale-teller would be known as a dancer on spider-webs in the lopper of men's heads. Folk that I shall tell you of, oh, how they had such ordinary eyes, but strange things shone in them that you could fall in and never be found until they sang about you again. Folk of ordinary feet and hands and noses and knees that would make known an elusive fire you could only see when described in poetry. And oh, how those fires lapped in wondrous forms. And all these shapes were sad and mad and glad, for there is no more alarming in a thing than the note of war. And it was known to us that the men most fond of making words into swords did seek to undo us. But for what purpose? What for did these people of diamond shapes have quarrel with us? A rude creature arose, and not one of exciting myth-making like I am telling you now, but one of many hands that made a pointing finger to each family present, and so it did spin and dance in a rude circle between all. The people of are to blame. They have allied with the island of the Valda kings. Nay, are at fault. We know their sailors have made trade or war by boat, for they leave with goats and return with many precious things. Nay, all nay, all dare to say. I cannot tell you how much was done, but in the hidden place where nothing could hide, not even words, not even swords, not a one did admit to a misgiving. All but for the people of Bale and Mott, who did make raid on the people of in-between, that is, from here to the Valda Inn. And who can really blame them for such trickery? We were not the woeful host. Nay, and not a thing can be done with a hand full of blame, and you cannot bury it as a seed unless you wanted to stow it in the peat until the time came to chew on it once more. Nay, one cannot eat blame, but chewing helps the hunger, and hard does it pass. For at long last it was agreed, if ever there was such a thing to agree to, for it was the honour and duty that must be done, with or without a happy heart, that the must be chosen, for all must become, in times of peril and dirty hearts. And tell you this, as it was told to me, as it was told to she that told me, and she and thee. And what is this of the, and of the, such it was she that told he, that told she that told me, as I tell thee, for such a thing as old as words and of swords, and as all the people that have known it. Aye, for that we are but a littered many thing across the moss and fen, and often is it when we meet again that our swords and words have become different and strange shapes to one another. Who shall find the name of and bring it forward, was the call. For although we knew the name, not but the eldest knew the meaning, not but the foremost knew the true name. For it was more than a word for land and sky and plant, and it was also which, as we know well, and the fox with all eyes turned inward like, for it was a singer and a dancer and a lopper with coracle feet, what slopped and slicked on fishing cat backs and spurned a talon 1 and 2 in every wayward eye. Like a whose bristles burned a fierce fault blue, and on the thorns and prickles there, on the tree at will, was a bellow and a killer and thing much faster than spring and winter, and on every head and shoulder she could tiptoe like shepherds on a woolly dog's croup. I tell you, as it was brought into that hidden place, and in every time the name was made upon that hidden place, for nothing, not words and not swords, could hide there, then and now. Here is the time of which they talked of, when she was, for then as it was now, the shoals were tilled inward by their boats, and made do a smiling havoc on the rocks and crop, bruised as a woeful woe, to seek out that chieftain with that old adnet hat, full blue shoulders, for she was made represent, and all abound made no dissent. And we lend our pity to that beast, for, like the river, and said, and you will never find it there. And the guild man said, tree, moon, and take of my back and wear it. And so she, as it was said then and there, from he, from she, from they, to me and to thee, the outrage of his blood turned blue, as sorrowed woad astride the back of a full blue woolly dog, swimming bog horse. For out of that meat did the chatter and song finally abate to stern and stoic words, and in the people of Baal and Mot promised a fleet-foot beat to the in-between land that looks over the people of Vinona, for their lords were the Valda, for they were keepers of the horses. And though they were not keen amidst fen and bog, the dunes and shoals of the pebble shores were theirs to make haste upon, was as words could not hide, and neither with swords from their sides, in that hidden place between the sleeping mares. All shapes and folk fit to fight did leave that hidden place, and in 9 moons' time was the first sign of those measured folk of the south. For they travelled into the fields and farms of the Valda end, fence post by post, and post haste over lands of Inona did they march like a bronze forest does not. Even the smallest child could spy the rise of pillaring dust, the colour of barley wine. As it was the smallest child that could tell you, so you too would remember. For people of the best maths they were, and makers of solutions that do not exist, For too are they the creators of problems that did not exist until we were made to speak the same language, which is of swords and not of words. For they climb the tallest middle of that in-between that looks above the Inona lands, so that they only march downhill to us in their own smiling delight. Nay, fret not, for though they have given us a language of dilemma, for we are cutters of giving soil and bog, and should they read the land as a face, and we shall make it scowl at their reproach. So too did the land become as an unwelcoming host, and hobble their measured steps that wished to stomp in the metre of pedants, but could not. Aye, so fly, Mareschal, fly, ball and mott. Take flight with your eastern horses. Move between the turfs and trench, as we all of them do without thought or hinder. Nay, I ought to tell you that it was a battle most long, for the measuring folk know well how to divide the day into manageable shapes. Not a single child they carried with them from behind, I shall say. Not a single husband or groom. The camp that was theirs was made not for living even but a bit. Not a single crying babe round any fire. Not a shrill living sound, but a low, long song. Not a song with any words among their ranks, I dare. For as we wear wild wooden faces on our heads, so they wore metal shapes of wicker and wattle and warp and weft. On that fourth day, a thing changed, as an egg cracks. I wish I could tell you that those folks of Son and of Galas and folk of Bellu and of Hlatz and Ludi, folk of all found spark on that fourth day, and danced and lopped and cut and blood the measured folk as a bronze forest does not. Oh, I want to tell lies and speak of how they fought valiantly and so bravely and were cut down one by one for a single filled slice. Nay, what I wish in this world, that though some perilous change was made in the face of the land, that they fought like folk to tell you what it cost our extractors. Nay, what words I wish a better trickster than I could tell, that any blood at all was spilt on that fourth day. Alas, the duller truth I must spell. For none what was told to me, as was from she, what did befell. Such was an innate, strange thing, as those strange and beautiful shapes with commonplace bodies and ordinary face. For it belies a greater truth that even poets cannot comprehend. So she, and so, for a spider knows not what art it weaves, and even wolves do weep. Bull and mop, for what a lilting, larking song, a bird knows not the melody. Shut the door, and never let it back inside.